Your normal clothes back on, Tom.
I'm reading a book. Hey, good book, by the way. The Seat of the Soul. It's quite new.
Who's the author?
Came out, Gary Zukav, who wrote The Dancing Woolly Masters, which I've championed for a long time as a science book, kind of science overlaid into, or interlaced into spirituality, or spirituality interlaced into science. In this book I was just reading, it's just a question. We're going to try to talk into reincarnation, but we'll start here because it has a question here that I kind of caught my eye. And it says, does non-physical reality exist? Well, if you're watching this tape, hopefully you have some inkling that there is a feasible or possibility non-physical reality to this thing we call the human condition. And this book also deals with the five sensory personality, which is basically all of us. But they're segmenting the fact that a lot of people, scientists, atheists, self-proclaimed atheists, because I don't believe there really is an atheist. I haven't met any yet. I've met a lot of people that
Think they are.
think that they are, claim that they are, and I've never met a real one yet. But at any rate, they typically, using just their five senses, like prove it to me, and it can't exist if you can't prove it, and vice versa. So this gives a question, in regards to the question, does non-physical reality exist? Says proof of non-physical reality does not exist in the dimension of the rational, that the rational mind seeks it. Therefore, when you ask from the perspective of a five-sensory personality, does non-physical reality exist? What you really are asking is, if I cannot prove the existence of non-physical reality, do I decide that it is nonsensical? Do I decide that there is no answer, or do I expand myself to the level at which the answer can be given? And
So you are your own limitation.
Well, yeah, that's very true. And, we're going to attempt to talk into reincarnation, make an attempt anyway. And one of the problems is that you're dealing with a non-physical reality, the mechanics of reincarnation, in that if any of that is true, well, that means that each of us, paying attention now, hearing this tape, is in an incarnation. So from that perspective, we are here, and this is what we call reality. Can we dare assume or prove or disprove the existence of a reality that we have no measurements for? There's no
recollection, no conscious memory of.
No provable recollection.
Right, because sometimes we have the memory and wonder where they come from.
And of course, my famous cautions of past life regression toward getting an answer of reincarnation is that be awfully careful that the regression that you are doing is not simply, and I say, as opposed to more intensively, just simply a clairvoyant functioning of another person, place, thing, or time that could be construed as a previous incarnation. Because all of the measurements that you will gain from a past life regression acting only clairvoyantly is identical to a bona fide past life regression.
Okay, so what you're saying, if I try, because this is really important to me, doing regression, is that if the hypnotist or the person guiding someone back isn't careful, the person could pick up on universal knowledge, which could be anybody's life.
Yes, right.
Rather than their particular life's remembrance.
And the fact that they are functioning clairvoyantly, in the true sense of the word, that they are being in the eyes of King George, that they are feeling what King George felt, that they're knowing intimate personal details, that they can see the secret passageway, the secret mistress, things that are both provable but are rare in history, and non-provable in history but are assuredly known by the person experiencing that. That can be done clairvoyantly.
So you would have had to have been that person to remember some of that person's life.
Coming back from a past life regression or being on a conscious level having had a past life regression, you might very well have gone into a past life of yours.
Mm-hmm.
If it be totally or characteristically, in other words, that you have gained a characteristic from this previous lifetime or this person of a previous lifetime, it might very well be. But the words that you will come back saying, the sentences and the proof that many people use as proof of reincarnation or past life regression, or in fact that it was my past life or your past life, the sentences that they say are not proof at all. They're an inclination that there is a possibility of that. So we're back to what can we prove and what can we disprove?
Right.
And one of the problems that we have a tendency to do is either sit around and wait and wish and read books and wait for somebody to tell us, such as me trying to tell you right now, of the existence of this thing called reincarnation, when in fact we, each of us individually, either have not had the opportunity or simply are not, for any number of excuses or no excuse at all, expanding our mind, expanding our ability to see knowledge, to gain knowledge, in a level or a capacity at which that level, that information will be explainable or seeable. Difficult subject. Well,
If
go
we
ahead.
go right back to saying most of us that are viewing this film were probably brought up in Christian faith, where reincarnation is not acceptable, or it's just beginning to expand to open the possibility.
Yeah, I have to interrupt because in Catholicism, in the Vatican, there are voluminous papers and scriptures and things like that on reincarnation.
That's what I was alluding to. I know in Shirley MacLaine's book, she said that there was a conscious effort in
politics.
that took all reincarnational information out of the Bible.
A little more power, a little more man-made power, a little more control of the masses.
That was the reason.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, sad as it might be for a spiritual conversation, that is the reality of the politics of so many churches, so many religions. That
but if you have more than one lifetime to work out your problems, you may not have to go to your minister or priest.
That's another tremendous fallacy on the part of people's attitude who seem to think, or in fact do, have a recognition or an understanding, or let's just leave it as a fervent belief regarding reincarnation, that, oh well, since I've come from many lifetimes and I have many lifetimes to go, if I screw this time up, I have another chance. And that isn't valid, because that's totally disregarding the fact that life is precious. Any life, any segment of life. And one of the things that I would wish for anybody to do, and again, I have to refer to that book, The Seed of the Soul, because it has a chapter on reverence. And for any of us to get in a conversation like this, we should be at our individual highest level of reverence for life. Reverence in general. Not just the dictionary definition either, but a true reverence for any aspect of life. For instance, a dialogue that I might talk about is reincarnation of a characteristic as opposed to an entire personality, as opposed to an entire soul. Now we'll have to use those terms. So I think I'll start out by giving a quick definition of a characteristic. Doesn't need much of a definition. In other words, I have a characteristic of being overbearing, obnoxious,
controlling.
In control.
Yeah.
That's a characteristic of mine, always has been. I was obsessively in control first 33 years of my life. That's a characteristic. Some people are selfish, some people are. In other words, any characteristic. So it doesn't really need an explanation. In other words, it's an aspect of you. It is not the entire you. In other words, you can be a very loving, wonderful person and have a characteristic that is absolutely intolerable to everybody else around you. All right, and vice versa. If you have many characteristics that are obnoxious or intolerable, you still can be a loving human being. And maybe one or two characteristics are more valuable or more recognizable as divine in nature or more pleasant, more pleasing, and that a vast majority of your characteristics are obnoxious or intolerable, then we would say his or her personality stinks or is intolerable. In other words, your personality...
So personality is made up of several characters.
Well, your personality is made up of all of your characteristics, and then generally, the majority of the characteristics will make up your personality. So we have a little problem there where you can have a couple of bad characteristics and still have a wonderful personality, because a personality is a larger measurement of many measurements, and it's an overall view. In other words, what is his or her personality? Well, you don't list all of the characteristics when you say, oh, his personality is nice, or he has a wonderful personality. You might say, well, he has an obnoxious personality that I just can't tolerate. And you may only be picking on one or two or a few of his characteristics. Or the reverse might be true, that it could be many characteristics. So it's a more ambiguous measurement, but it is a valid measurement. And that a person's personality is not necessarily all of your characteristics, but it might be all of your characteristics. Having said that, the word soul is the more universal, the unified field theory in action. As a matter of fact, it is. It's a more universal wholeness of the being. You are a human being. Well, a human being what? A human being, the soul, incarnate in the human form. And you are being a personality. You are also being at least one or more of your characteristics all of the time. You can be one characteristic as sleeping, or you can be one characteristic as loving, or outgoing, or introverted, or quiet. Those are all characteristics. Your personality may or may not be shown in doing one or two or more of those characteristics at any one time. But if another person is around you long enough, or intensively enough, or intimately enough, the other person will have a judgment of your personality. And then if those are typical characteristics that you have shown that person, by typical I mean usual on a long-term basis and so on, that will give an indication to your personality. But none of those measurements are worth very much at all toward your soul. And one of the problems is that all of your worst characteristics collected all together, measured accurately and collected by the best judges in the world, the best judged people, or all the measurements that we use to measure either a characteristic or a personality. If you had all of those together, it shows nothing of the soul. Now, one of the things that I want to claim and state is that the soul of you, being a female and redhead, and just another redhead. No, it's your soul is certainly incarnate in your personality. Your personality is the redhead, the person, the female sex, the gender, along with all of your characteristics. Now, they are different in many ways, a lot of ways, maybe even a majority of the ways, than my characteristics and my personality. But our souls are quite identical. In other words, can you tell the difference between one cup of light to another cup of light? And on that level, of course, we think, a majority of us think of the singular God as the light. In other words, the Trinity, the oneness of the Trinity is God. And God is the oneness, God is the light, God is light. Right, all those words, and they all mean about the same thing, or close enough that for this talk, we'll say it that way. And we'll say that oneness, that light, is the universal, unconditional love state of God. It's the only other description that we can give to God, other than possibly segregate unconditional love and then say light, or But anyway, it's all meaning the same thing. In other words, the state of unconditional love is light. Light is unconditional love, spiritual light at least, and that is God. Okay? Now, a singular soul has the same power. Now listen carefully, because you have to hear the next couple of sentences to qualify. Don't ever quote Tom Sawyer saying, a singular soul has the same power as God. Well, I'm saying that you have exactly the same intensive power as God. You have the same potential as God. And I mean, here we're getting close to making that statement that you or I are God, that we are God within the human condition. All right, so let me build off this to qualify it. That the oneness of the whole, or the wholeness of the one, being God, is ultimately powerful. You cannot conquer, divide, or diminish unconditional love. It exists omnipresently, omnipotently, or however they say all those things. And that's true, and it exists like that. If you take one cup, a cupful of God, you have God in the cup. That can't be diminished at all. Now, if God, by God's own infinite wisdom and love and so on, decided or decides to allow a few gleams or a cup of light to be used in such a way as a soul, and for the purpose of incarnating into the human condition, to our level, the light involved in that, and there is light involved in that, is not that there is no light involved. There is light involved. And our soul is that light. It is that one cup, that small amount of that which was purely, divinely God. It has the full power of that. One gleam of light has the same luminescence, the same unconditional love, the same power of God.
Okay, so Tom, does that mean that if each soul has a cup of the light of God in it, then every soul being equal to every other soul, that no one is more highly evolved than another?
Yeah, basically, from our perspective, that's true. And that on the soul level, there is no greater soul. I know we sometimes use that word and say, oh, he's a highly evolved soul. The soul doesn't evolve. The personality
The soul
does.
is already perfect.
All right, and I want to maintain the word, the soul, for what it is. I mean, we misuse, well, I'm stating that for this conversation at least, to state that the soul evolves at all is not correct. So in other words, sentences that we're used to having heard, or that we have sometimes said, that he or she is a highly evolved soul, or your soul has a long ways to go, right? We can't say those sentences. We then have to start to focus on, which I'm wishing for, which I'm asking for in this talk, is that to recognize personalities. Your personality can be evolved, highly evolved, lesser evolved, no evolvement at all. You're just stagnant. You have the ability to create negative karma, to go backwards, so to speak. You can be born with a certain personality and characteristics and so on that can be culturally conditioned or decommissioned, if you will, and go pretty much backwards. You can actually lose a little bit in your actual evolvement to a spiritual recognition, a spiritual reality, and so on. It's not just as simple as, well, I'm going to be a carpenter this time, and next time I be strictly an intellectual. It's not that simple. You have the human potential of evolving within your personality in practically any and all of those things. Now, you can be limited by, for instance, cultural conditioning, socioeconomical class systems that the world exists. I mean, can that little starving child in Biafra become a physicist? I don't think it would be realistic. It's not completely impossible, but it's unrealistic. And I
It
like it.
doesn't matter if the child or the physicist are that, whether they're loving. I mean, the bottom line of
Well, yes. In other words, if they can recognize their own potential for love and then ultimately become that love, then that's the greater scheme of things rather than to become rich or poor or another
have degrees or whatever.
Again, the external power type accomplishments. In other words, if you have more money than I, are you more highly evolved? Well, certainly not. We know the suicide rate, for instance, is greater in psychologists and psychiatrists than they are in mundane workers, menial type tasks such as shoveling stone or the farmer type stuff, meaning physical work that doesn't require it's hands on instead of heads on. And that's not true. That happiness and love is not relevant to either socioeconomical class or cultural conditioning or external accomplishments. In other words, internally, should you take a lesser of a job, meaning employment, and be happy? And I'm telling you that yes, you should. You should always test yourself, and you should strive to do more, get better, get more money, therefore be more financially secure so that you can have a little spare time to listen to tape recordings and things of this nature. But as a matter of fact, yeah, should you take that higher paying job and be miserable, or should you be poorer financially and be happy? I mean, why should I even answer? I mean, if you're listening to this tape and you're considering that, well, I should leave you alone and let you consider it.
So from your point of view, with your experience as having been part of the light, what is your description? What is your definition of reincarnation?
Oh, goodness, here we go with a simple definition. Well, it is opportunities to evolve through more than one personality. Now, again, I'm stating that personality is a combination of characteristics of yourself, which makes up your personality, and then to go through more than one personality. Because, see, I'm using the word personality meaning who you are. In other words, like as I incorrectly say, your entire epistemology, I mean everything that you are. And in that way, my definition of reincarnation is that your personality is this, who you are at this time, and that it can be reincarnated as an entirely different personality.
With the same soul.
Right, and with an equal soul. In other words, either the same soul or an equal soul having nothing to do with evolvement on that level. It also can, in other words, in this conversation, we can state that a reincarnation that a person dies and goes totally homogeneous back into the light, that is reasonably improbable to have a reincarnation. Either considering it prior, that was a past life, or a future life, that you will be reincarnated or that you have been reincarnated into this current personality, right? It's improbable. It is not usual that takes place. It is more usual that you die or transform into spirituality, which is not totally homogeneous with the light, but remain in a realm of the earth plane. And by that I mean, in other words, within the earthly confines of the human condition, with an attachment of sorts to the human condition. And that may take place many times. The proverbial 10,000 lifetimes in Buddhism is a little ridiculous, in my opinion. I mean, they picked a number that is extraordinary for the purposes of teaching. If it be an exact number, of course, it's ridiculous. It's saying, let's count the number of personalities.
So you leave your body behind, you go into the spirit realm, and if you haven't learned everything you should, you take on another body. And you keep doing that until
your soul,
you're ready to go into the light.
And your soul is maintained throughout. Mm-hmm. In other words, as you transform, your soul does not get bigger or smaller, nor does it go totally homogeneous back with the light, usually. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, you carry with you characteristics of your personality. And the most simplistic example that I can give is, say, the phrase burning off bad karma means that you have characteristics that are malicious, non-loving, judgmental, overly this, too much that, too much this. And therefore, you have to get rid of that or deal with that. It doesn't mean that you literally burn it up or anything, but you have to deal with it. You have to recognize it, you have to face it, and you have to become that. And then if it is degradation, you have to upgrade it. And if it's an accolade, an over accolade, then you have to get a little humiliation in there to become a little more humble.
For instance, like some people think that if you killed lots of cats in your last lifetime, that in the next lifetime you'll be a cat. But it could be, if you killed lots of cats in your lifetime, then you'll be such a lover of cats that you'll take in 15 or 20.
Also, I've never been comfortable. Yeah, I've never been comfortable with this idea that many people have, that whatever you do bad this time, you're going to come back and have to deal with it in the form of a punishment or a retribution or a rectification. There is characteristics like that. Talking characteristics of reincarnation, that there is a cause and effect relationship there, that you will be given the opportunity. See, everything is opportunities. It's difficult to comprehend that. If you had phobias in a prior lifetime, that you still have to deal with those phobias. And why should you be bothered with such a thing if you learn? There's the key. That in fact you didn't learn, or you didn't totally comprehend. And it doesn't mean that you have to accumulate all of this knowledge and all of these experiences, but more than less it's like that. It's more realistically like that than not.
Okay. So if you've learned from the lesson, then you don't carry it into the next lifetime. But if you haven't, whatever the situation may recycle for the learning process.
You can learn something. You can learn something and not become it.
Yeah.
Now, I would prefer you to think in terms of learn it to the degree that you can become it. And if it's a bad thing, you can become that bad thing and then overcome it. Because you have to become it to overcome it. It was in that realm. Just to learn that, I was a seamstress in this lifetime, therefore I'm never going to do any sewing again or anything like that anymore. Or I have no need or desire, or it doesn't work that way. It may have been just a prerequisite. Also, there is characteristics that have been brought into your incarnation that could be from many personalities.
That was my next question.
Yeah. The prodigy children, the scenarios like that, idiot savant, certain forms of genius or intensities of genius, certain forms of retardation, in fact, are not a mistake per se. They're just a mix and match of characteristics and personalities.
So the child that can sit down and play a piano at the age of 5 is bringing through personality from a previous lifetime.
All right. And again, I just want to correct you for the conversation, not the personality, but that characteristic of the previous personality.
Right.
In other words, you can accumulate characteristics from your personalities, those of previous lifetimes. And another thing that I don't know if has ever been talked about, I don't know if I can, it's one of my difficult things that I know and I can't emulate it, so I'll try, is that this distortion of time that I've talked about before, where everything is in the isness of the now, there is no past and there is no future in true spirituality. That's a construct of man, therefore illusory, therefore not our actual reality. Well, all that is true, and there is no such thing as time. Now, having said that, if there is no future and there is no past, am I saying that a personality of the future could be affecting you now? And I am saying that. And that is something that I haven't seen in any books or anything, because people will show me books on reincarnation and the eagerness for me to talk about reincarnation. as I see it and give at least my opinions and my knowledge on the subject. That's one of the points that, first of all,
you could be learning from your future.
You're sure? And you can have characteristic of your future personality. And I don't see any problem with that.
Uh-huh.
And I know that people listening or watching this are going to say, oh, just about the time I had a linear type thing to memorize and a linear type thing that, well, 1,500 years ago I was King George, now I see why I'm so pugnacious. Or again, dealing with characteristics. And I don't mean to confuse anybody, but I can't do justice to saying anything without saying...
But all futures probability. So you've got like 5 problems.
Oh, now you're starting to see that this is a very complicated subject. Because that's true. That future scenarios are not absolute. And that free will, changes, subtle manipulation at different spiritual realms can change your future characteristic and personality. So if you're here now dealing with a future personality or a characteristic of a future personality, what happens if it doesn't come true? Was that really a characteristic of a future personality? Well, the answer to all these things is yes, all the way down the line.
You are all of your probable future.
Yeah, and you will be responsible for it. I don't mean that to say, watch out, you're going to be responsible, so don't be bad. I mean, that's a power of positive thinking, a good thing to say, to maintain, it's better to be good than bad. But the answer is yes, that you will be responsible for everything.
Everything you ever consider.
Every characteristic and every denial of a characteristic. I mean, we are all famous for that. I mean, all my life, practically all my life, I've denied characteristics that I just refused, I should say now, of being able to see clearly. In other words, damn it, I was right. I was justified. I was righteous. And yet, what was the intent? What was the actual intention? The true, honest intention was to love. And I'm saying this of a particular time in my life. Was to love. But what did I do? I hurt instead.
Yes.
My intentions were to love, but my actualities were to hurt because of a whole series of justifications, righteousness, and that. In other words, did I have expectations of my wife Elaine, and did they meet my actual experiences? Well, when that did not take place, and it doesn't take place a lot of times for all of us. I mean, every one of us have either over or under expectations, and they're not fulfilled because our daily or minute-by-minute experiences would never be able to accomplish that because of our ability to fantasize, to create fantasies and so on that are unrealistic or non-just or non-correct or just aren't suitable or appropriate. And that if we're dealing with something like a relationship, like I mentioned with my wife Elaine and I, it's very unrealistic to have very many expectations at all because I'm expecting things that she'll deal with in her free will.
Here's another one in terms of reincarnation. I've met 2 different women who thought they were the same personality in history. Is that possible?
Yeah. All right. The linear way of thinking of that is the answer that would be highly improbable. Now, I would suggest to anybody that runs into that dilemma situation or that circumstance to really get a little more intelligent, a little more realistic.
Could they both be just like linking into universal knowledge?
Well, they could be linking into a characteristic that is identical. I mean, how are you or any one of us to differentiate an identical type characteristic? So, I mean, if you're looking at a beautiful sunset and you say something about that sunset, is it the same sunset that I'm also talking about? And can we both learn the identical lessons from that same sunset? Yes, we can. So as opposed to being totally offensive, but again, what I would say to anybody that runs into that, get a little more realistic about where did you get that measurement from? That was not where, meaning the place, but in what mindset? How did you do it? Was it a past life regression? Was it sudden intuitive knowledge? Did you read it out of a book? Was it a genealogical trait? Isn't it funny, people that say a past life regression, they don't even bother following their genealogical trait? Because granted, most of us can only be able to follow that back 4 or 5 generations accurately at all, but there's things there to learn. And I'll give you a perfect example. I've heard people say, in a past life, I was an alcoholic. All right? I didn't have any problem with that. I thought, well, that's interesting. I hope that you learned something. Use it wisely. Don't condemn yourself for it, or don't brag about it. It's neither here nor there, and you're not in that lifetime. You're in this lifetime, and this is what you have to deal with, and this is the priority, okay? But isn't it funny that I found out that that same person either did or did not have any alcoholism at all in their family tree? And let's be realistic. That's more probable as having either a problem or a minimum opportunity for a problem of alcoholism. Meaning a problem with alcohol is more genealogical than it is spiritually enhanced by the way of reincarnation of a characteristic of a prior lifetime.
So what's the value of looking into your previous life?
Well, first of all, it's reading any book, getting into any kind of additional knowledge that you've not been exposed to before, that's always of value. You can get mind boggled and bogged down with too many things too fast, but generally, any new and interesting information is just that, new and interesting, and it'll have a tendency to stimulate your growth. It may be boring. You may say, oh my goodness, I spent so much money and so many hours reading this dopey book of 1,000 pages, and it's just about fairies and Dungeons and Dragons type stuff. And you say, wow, I could have done this or that in that length of time. No, don't be hard on yourself. Don't be judgmental. That was a process that you went through. And here we go with talking about what we did in the past. What does it mean right this minute, and what does it mean in the next minute? And I mean, always go for the progress. If it's a bad experience, well, you've learned several things. If it's a good experience and it's repeatable, and if you're able to repeat it, well, test it. Try to repeat it. Definitely have a tendency to not try to repeat something that is negative or bad or had a bad result. And if people use any inclination of reincarnation, that's what I would prefer. I mean, I see a lot of people, just flying off on a tangent, getting obsessive and possessive and one-upsmanship. Well, you were only this, well, I was. And sometimes our ego gets fed by power of suggestion. Well, yeah, I think I can claim this one too. Then it's not true. I mean, generally, if you have to decide in that way, well, it's close enough. It's pretty close. The answer's still no. I mean, be more scientific about it. Be as sure as you can be. And then the bottom line is, of what value is any of that? Well, one of the greatest things that I've ever experienced through other people with having any realization of a past life characteristic is, say, dealing with a phobia. And it has helped and therefore cured a current phobia of individuals. Rah, big deal. That is a big deal for that individual, but so what does that all mean? In other words, now that they're cured of this particular characteristic, what about their personality? And how has that fit into their personality? Well, it's helped their personality a little bit because they no longer have a phobia. But that's only a drop in the bucket.
Well, I suppose so. If somebody has an incredible fear of crowds or an incredible fear of agoraphobia of not going out, or a fear of heights or whatever, and if they go through hypnosis toward trying to find out where that comes from, and you realize in a previous lifetime you were pushed off a cliff, or you were suffocated, or a crowd stoned you to death or whatever, if you can put it in your past and go on and do things.
And let it go. Love it for what it was.
Love it and let it
Love
go.
it as a learning experience alone, and let it go. And abracadabra, so to speak, because it can happen.
Right.
that quickly.
Right. But a person could also say, well, since I was stoned in a previous lifetime by crowds, that's why I'm afraid of crowds. So I'm still going to say, sometimes they don't take it and put it aside.
Yeah. And the other thing, again, maybe there's more warnings about reincarnation than anything else. It's, by my perspective, what I can share outwardly with you is that, be aware that you will be given, it's love, it's not punishment or anything else. You will be given enough opportunities to square things away. There's a military phrase that says, squared away, good to go. And only at such time as you're really squared away are you good to go. And I mean, I kind of like that because, we've got all of our baggage, all of our stuff that we're dealing with, all of our righteousness and justification. Well, I'm calling you a jerk only because you called me a jerk first. And I have to teach you, well, wait a minute. Who decided you had to be the teacher for that person at that moment? And are you really attempting to be that person's teacher, or are you just lashing out because you've been hurt? And how does that fit into any kind of true love? How does that fit into love?
Okay, see, another thing that comes to mind is when you take the brand new baby born, there's two schools of thought. One is that child was created in the image of God and is perfect. Like you say, the soul is light, no better, perfect, no less than any other. And then you grow up thinking, I'm a reflection of God and I do my best and that. Then the other school of thought is that baby is carrying all the sins of the parents or the sins of the past lifetimes or whatever, and has to sort of crawl its way out of the muck and mire of negativity to find its spirituality. When in essence, when it was born to begin with, it was perfect spirituality. And
the problem is, the answer is yes to all of the above. Now, you said all the muck and mire and the sins carried with it, carried all the stuff, but didn't they equally and also bring in characteristics and acknowledgments of other personalities that just make that irrelevant? And that this incarnation, having carried any and all of that, is the opportunity to deal with all of that. And of course, love and get rid of or cast off all the negative, all the bad stuff, and enhance and enjoy, and enhance is a good word, into more and more and better and better.
So as a parent of a child, to say either you're a sinner and you have to work out of all that, or you're a child of God and you have to let that shine, both of those statements can be true at the same time.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'll call him back. Okay.
Okay, that answers lots of questions for me because there's so many spiritual paths to God in their own clues.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it ends up being so much more confusing than you can't do it. You can't do it in one tape. You can't do it in one book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I'm wondering where we can go from
here. I know. I'm staring at you, looking. Come on, ask me a question or something. Get me on a roll.
Okay. Maybe what we can do is sort of wind up for the moment because I know we wanted to get into the subject of reverence as well. But is there anything else?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I don't think we can go off on a tangent. I mean, I can't go off on a tangent right now and just reverence. I would wish to and like to, but I don't think that I can right now. I'm mind-boggled right now with all of the actualities of reincarnation. And, it's not a linear thing. It's so many knots. And that, see, one of my problems is I'm famous for my analogies and so on. And there is no analogy to this. I mean, it's outside of time, and yet we can't help but think of it in terms of past and future. And this incarnation. So the language breaks down regarding that. It has to do with unconditional love of God creating this, and then you're dealing with cause and effect. You're dealing with good and bad, righteousness. We're being judgmental just by dealing with the subject itself. So in other words, in wallowing in our actualities, our reality, we are in that mindset that disallows a recognition of the scope of reincarnation itself. The intensity. The whole story is so big, it's so involved.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that's the that's the only book that will be many more pages than my biography. It's just so much.
So it's maybe we don't have to try to grasp the whole reality of the truth of it all. I know when my mom was dying, I thought, oh, well, she'll pass over into spirit and then she'll know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And her prejudice against other races and her prejudice against other classes, people with less money or more money, that'll be all cleared up because once she's spirit, she'll have all the truth and all the answers.
And there would be a probability toward that. I mean, I would prefer to call it a
But
probability.
then if she were born into another body, she wouldn't remember it all.
Well, right.
Yeah.
This is one of our problems. Now, there's our right here, right now.
Why then? Why? What is reincarnation all about? Since none of us bring in the memory bank
Well,
of the life.
I think what we should have done in the beginning is saying that reincarnation is an opportunity to reach a goal. And what is that goal? The goal is true self-realization. Now, self-realization starts out at realize all of your characteristics, all of them. Some aren't so fun. Now, do you ever sword fight? No, I only respond when she yells at me. Wait a minute. So you glared at her and she responded so that you could, Again, so you deal with your characteristics and so on. And then self-realization goes into that, wow, you do a great, wonderful thing if you can ever truly realize your self-personality. In other words, your larger self, your greater self, all of your characteristics, your true self. Wait a minute, that's only the beginning. Self-realization is that you are a soul. And yet, I don't know of anybody who has a very good image at all. Again, I even said image. An image of, in other words, me for me, my soul. In other words, my whole self. Well, my whole self, though. And that what proportion is my personality in relationship to my soul? Well, I do have a measurement that I'll share with you, and it'll be ambiguous enough that it can't offend anybody, is that if my characteristic is 1%, a characteristic is 1% of my characteristics, and all of my characteristics is my personality is only about 5% of my soul. So that gives you an idea of the minuscule thing that we think that which we are. Well, we're all of this and all of that and all this other stuff. And I'm stating that at any given time, and actually for me, you're sitting here right now, I wouldn't give myself credit as truly knowing myself, even on a personality level. And it was that which the psychologists say, well, you will come to know all of yourself. And I say, baloney. That's a psychology level. God bless them and what they're trying to do. I mean, I kind of like my track record better than any of theirs. And I'm not really condemning them, but I am putting them in their place. And psychology doesn't know much of anything. Very few psychologists recognize a soul or a spiritual being at all. So you're blinding yourself of 95% of your actuality. In other words, you're blinding yourself. You're covering up your eyes and saying, there, now I'm going to try to see what it's like to have a beautiful sunset with your eyes covered up. Wait a minute, don't cover up your eyes. That's what you use. That's the instrument that you use it. And your soul is the instrumentation of God being human. Or a human being God. It's the instrument that's used. The instrument for your characteristics is your personality. And of course, the human body is the physical manifestation and the house, if you will, or the instrument of your brain and therefore your mind. Because your mind is the connectedness between your soul self and your mind and your brain. Your brain is the psychology connectedness to your psychology, that which interconnects your mind and your brain. And your psychology can function either biochemically or spiritually enhanced. All of a sudden you have a feeling of glory and glee and utopia. Are you actually perceiving a teardrop from God's eye? Or are you perceiving a biochemical function of beta endorphins? In other words, are you just stimulating nerve endings? Or are you having a creative, glorious feeling of creativity?
That's what they say about near-death experiences, right?
Well, right, and both are true, by the way. I've never denied that. A large portion, a good portion, a percentage portion of many of the experiential actualities of any near-death experience are biochemically induced. The first 3 or 4 or 5 stages, depending on what research group you're getting the numbers from, the feeling of complete easement. Notice the pain and pressure was gone. I felt at ease. I felt like I could just pop out of my body, and I did. Up to that point, fine. I'll go along with biochemical produce analgesic flow of beta endorphins and enkephalins and opiates and all that sort of stuff. And it works that way. And that's how it's designed. That's, God designed it to do that. All right? And it does that by God. But what I want to tell you also equally and often simultaneously or irrespective of that this can take place, you can also be inspired spiritually speaking. And that it's not just that you arrange certain biochemicals just right and with the right amount of electricity, so to speak, that you got this utopia feeling. It can be inspired spiritually. And then a characteristic of yours, and this personality could be, biochemically, we're learning that some people that are happy all the time, there is a brain functioning that does that. And that they can compare medically and scientifically, right down to the part of the brain, and either the missing link, so to speak, the missing part, or the missing flow of biochemical stuff is just the opposite in a person who is manically depressed. And that they are manipulating that and curing the manically depressed and assisting people to be happier. And this is in the very near future if we continue as we are. And that's all okay. But that doesn't deny at all that those same individuals, if they come in contact with their soul, if they have any recognition, any perception at all of the actuality of the soul self, instead of just sticking with this 5% of the physical stuff that makes us alive, makes us function. I mean, you can take a skate, another that swims in the ocean, a little skate, and after it's been dead for hours and hours and hours, even days if it hasn't really rotted, and put electrodes on it and have it swim. Now, does that mean that the skate is alive and swimming? The skate will be reacting electronically to biochemical only. And there will not be spirituality there. Again, we know that, most of us realize that there's spirituality in everything. But it is uniquely the skate as being an animal. It is only reacting to biochemical stimuli. And then a lot of us think that we're not really in love. We're just biochemically being stimulated into this romantic love or this lustful love. And both is true. Both is very true. I mean, you can be stimulated biochemically only, and you can be in a piss poor mood. But the other is true, and that makes it glorious because that's the reward, if you will. If you ever think in terms of rewards or
Okay, when you had your near-death experience and you went out of body, left the body behind, going into the tunnel, did you have a sense of being the other 95% of yourself?
yeah, very much so. Well, I mean, I want to caution anybody listening to this. You asked me.
I'm asking you
All right.
personally. For your own.
The answer is yes. It's fair to say, even though I don't like to say, that of the people that I've been involved in research, in a goodly proportion, more than 50% of the other near-death experiencers that I've either met personally or known or learned from through the research, that statement would not be true. Even though in their sentences they say that they become one with their soul, and in other words, the sentences, the terminology, the words. Judgmentally, I would say that a vast majority of those people, it's tough to say.
Is far enough into the near-death state to have had that experience?
See, I don't want to criticize or condemn them
No,
because
it's
they
not.
experienced something twice as much or 100 times as much as that which they could have experienced otherwise. And that's okay, that's great. But I'm claiming that I know the difference and that there is a difference. And that people that, for instance, that describe that they went to heaven and then they stand there and describe imagery like flowers and creeks and angels and, borderlining on angels and things like that. That's beautiful and that's very heavenly. But then that leaves me with an explanation of, I know a heaven state that is more subtle than that and, shall I say, at the same time more intensive and more glorious, more divine. You don't need imagery. You don't need the paradise stuff. It's still stuff.
Yeah. You go
And I mean, God doesn't need stuff. I know the true nirvanic state, the ultimate utopia.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I know you said that you had a complete life review, and a complete review of all your dreams. Did you have a complete review of all your lifetimes?
No.
Okay.
That was easy. But trust me, I know a lot more than what I'm saying.
I know you say you never lie, so I hate when you say that.
Well, the correct answer is no.
Yeah.
In a typical life review, there is
You're only
usually
reviewing this life.
I'm trying to think right now, and I can't think of anybody else who said anything about prior to their birth process.
Mm-hmm.
There's been a few inclinations that they knew of circumstances prior to their birth, but as the moviola type life review, as most people perceive it to be, no, I can't recall anybody right now of the few thousand that I know that have gone through an intensive near-death experience that experience anything toward reincarnation or anything toward their other lifetimes or even characteristics or personalities.
As you came back and began functioning again after your accident, you had an awareness of people in history.
Mm-hmm.
And at first we thought that you were those people in history. But then I think some people come to the conclusion that it was linking into universal knowledge that you were these people in history.
All right, because I had the groups. I referred to often the pluralistic people because it was more than one character. The most easy to talk about is the group of scientists around the turn of the century: Niels Bohr, Werner Heisenberg, Max Planck, including Albert Einstein. But because of his popularity, I often have a tendency not to state his name because it's just so typical that if you're going to know any scientist, well, you have to know Albert Einstein. Irrespective of that ego stuff. Yeah, that would be a group. That was one of the groups that I referred to. Now, that group comes from, first of all, a characteristic of my personality, and in the transitional state of my near-death experience, desiring to be like or know either the knowledge that they dealt with, the information that they dealt with, or the mindset or those characteristics. In other words, there's kind of a uniform characteristic of each of those people, and I have a slight characteristic like that. So I'm attracted to that same thing.
And also you had work to do to continue on this level that knowledge was important, right?
Well, that's true also. And again, was my life enhanced by the near-death experience itself, by getting a perception and sharing some informational exchange on that level? The answer is, of course, yes. And that really has little or nothing to do with reincarnation per se. It has more to do with, like you suggested, that it would be from the Akashic record type stuff, the big library in the sky, the aspect of total knowledge, and that can be attained toward on a level from the human condition, fervently pondering or meditating or whatever, and reaching up to that. That is not becoming that. And there's a big difference, a very big difference. Because in my experience, I experienced both of those aspects. In other words, I was in tune with, or at one met with, and available to me was total knowledge in a question and answer period, and as actually as close as I can say, part of my life review was before a certain decision was made regarding that which was more in my near-death experience. The last stage or so, and that's the most intensive state or the most subtle state of my near-death experience, was becoming total knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that did not make it unique, but it made it quite rare. So I'm not a good example when it comes to talking about, in other words, you shouldn't use me as an example for things, especially when it comes to the subject of reincarnation or that type of stuff.
But I'm still going to ask you, what about the Vivaldi? Since I got you on film. Just for the listeners who were watchers who haven't seen this before your near-death experience, you couldn't even stand classical music, and when you came back, you not only recognized Vivaldi's music, but you seemed to have an understanding of his thought processes when he was writing certain things.
I got as close as I got talking to Elaine just a short while ago, a couple of weeks ago. And I said something about second soprano, and something was mentioned about Vivaldi. And I said, well, I sang that once as a second soprano. That's as close as I got to admitting anything close to, seriously, close to the characteristic of having a degree or a form of reincarnation of, I'm Tom Sawyer here, and to having that kind of connectedness with a past life recall, even if it be only a characteristic having to do with the female gender. Now I'm talking in reality, or the physical reality, the physicality of the female gender. So it was that, but in that capacity, there's differences and so on, spiritually speaking, and that, I don't know if I can correlate this to the second soprano part, but it had to do with a young lady who, right, and I wondered why I was always attracted to that name. It's kind of curious. So see, now I'm falling prey to the same set of circumstances as why have I always liked that name? As I kind of like looked around, well, I don't know anybody by that name, and maybe it's just that Felicia or Felicity, that it's a test of something in my near-death experience was a test of my felicity, as I wrote it down later on, and I don't use terminology like that, so there was a clue there and so on. And that is, in all actuality, I was going to say probability, in all actuality, was that there was a characteristic there that I was that, or therefore that which was is now a part of me. That's a more correct way of saying it, because I am not she. A characteristic of she is part of me. No problem. Because, see, again, the ego involves, say, well, I was King George. Oh, well, la-di-da, then where's all your jewels? Let's go buy a new car.
Yeah.
Instead of worrying about paying the bills, you didn't do a very good job. If you were that grandioso person, and now you're just a schlemiel.
So going back to reincarnation now, if you meet somebody in your life or have a burning desire to play the piano and you've never taken lessons, or, from my point of view, I've always felt like somewhere in here there's a wonderful singing voice, but it never seems to come out. The kids will tell you for sure. Then it could be keying into a personality fragment that might have been yours in a previous life.
Yeah, and yet the way you presented that, I would say a probability toward that. And again, a minor little caution is go for the characteristic and never mind the character. And again, then the character equals the personality. Because to claim that you were the personality of a previous individual, well, that's getting kind of rude. That's kind of egotistical, first of all. And I mean, because, you're taking on an awful lot of responsibility. Because if you knew what your entire personality before, well, you would damn well better be really good at what you do this time. No, it's a prerequisite that if you have that much recognition of a personality of yours, not just a characteristic. I mean, it's a grand thing for any one of us to deal with a characteristic of ours now and then and get over it. I mean, I'm going through that transitional state this last couple months regarding certain things that I've shared with you, and personally and privately. But to claim that of even a single other personality, well, you've got to be good, because it would be a tragedy and a waste to not have vast, voluminous amounts of information regarding who you are and the actual cause and effect relationship regarding that. So some of these people, they have a tendency to brag at parties of their 5 incarnations. They would really be a little embarrassed to hear the long version of this conversation. And if that is true, then therefore they must know this, this, and this, and this. And they should be really well adept at it, because I think they would end up embarrassing themselves. And that would actually help their personality. Yeah. I don't know. We didn't get into this very deeply, but I think it's a start.
We just scratched the surface.
And even if we, again, use this tape as an introduction, and of course, as I promised before, and I didn't come up with the actual outline, because I think really what I'm going to have to do is not only make an outline, but have a poster. And during the taping, point and show on the poster, and there's a black border of poster, because of the flip-flopping back and forth that we obviously have to do. So in other words, I'll say, well, wait a minute now, that's a characteristic, not a personality. And so they have a visual aid to be able to say, see, that up at this level or down at this level. And even though I never, I always hate that up and down ladder type measurements, I can't think of any other way to accurately maintain a person's attention on how to build off it. Because, again, we haven't touched on so many things. You have to talk about characteristics such as external power, the accumulation of power, and that if you've done that for a half of a lifetime or a full lifetime, what does that in itself mean? And what does that is actually a prerequisite of something regarding reincarnation. And that all of that which is accumulated, if it be materialistic or power, by the power I mean that ego or humanistic type power, the power of money, the power of manipulation on a psychological level, that has to be dealt with. And that will be dealt with before you can ever take on another personality in a future life, or when you zip through that tunnel and end up back at your creator, as with God or as part of God.
Since we still have a little more time and we're sort of superficially covering the subject, what about group reincarnation? Say, like, it's been said that a lot of people who were in Atlantis all chose to come back at this time to help the Earth through its transition state, or say your family of you and Elaine and Tom and Todd and Tim and the grandparents. When you come in as a whole family, there's so many different questions.
Mm-hmm.
If you're passing over one at a time, do you all wait on the other side together to reincarnate back in and make your decision of, well, who's the father this time? You know, have you any idea of how all of that kind of works?
Yeah, I do. And as opposed to like giving the 3 or 4 sentence definition of that, I have to start by saying the problem with that is that you're so casually skipping over the part about the soul level. In other words, the levels at which the soul is maintained is a singular soul, which can gain a personality this next time. And then what is the holding pattern? And what does that all mean? Well, right away, they are not up there waiting. Because what do you mean, waiting for what? Waiting for time?
I mean, are there like group souls?
Well, I'm agreeing that yes, there is. That yes, there is. That's reasonably rare. It's usually misconstrued. Because how do you differentiate between a family of any sort and a personality? See, you're saying like a group of souls. Were they personalities at any given time? And you're saying that yes, they were. Lemuria or Atlantis. And that if they are coming back now, what is the intention? And so, well, the intention is to salvage your love or promulgate unconditional love or for the service of this or that or that. Okay, well, what was it in their personalities or individually their personality that disallowed them to gain other personalities for the purposes of this escalative type thing to gain and deal with and solve their personality problems and accolades and what have you, to become totally homogenous with the light again.
So that they wouldn't have to come back.
And I'm not condemning them, saying that there must have been something bad or sad
Or unlearned
or unfinished business that they have had to wait around, as we perceive it, to this time, or for the purposes of, in total knowledge, they saw that there would be the onset of the new age, and that without their help, this one little characteristic might have been neglected or unfinished. And that's not that great of a thing. I know that's not as glorious as having no personalities in the plural. In other words, a group soul incarnation. We can't get off onto a tangent and do justice to that. There is subtle forms of manipulation on various levels. See, we haven't even gotten into levels, because I just skipped from a spiritual impermeation of a soul body being attached to the earth, the big blue marble. I haven't gotten into other galaxies and so on, that there can be personalities, or your soul can be simultaneously, here we go, functioning in an entirely other galaxy. But I don't know of any circumstance where your personality right now, which is the largest point of your perceptible soul, and that your practically inconceivable soul self is functioning as another personality in another galaxy. I would say no to that. I can't disprove that. but I don't know of any circumstance where that is true. However, your soul being of its nature can be functioning, well, it's too simple to say in other ways, but I guess I'm stuck with that, in other ways, in an entirely other galaxy. Because again, we have a linear perception of we're here on this Earth, the big blue marble, in this solar system, and in this galaxy.
And something I read from Dick Sutton a few years ago, he had a theory that, you know, when they talk about twin souls or soulmates, or not in the romantic sense, but like there was some evidence of someone living in Europe and someone living in America simultaneously meeting, and their artwork being exactly the same. It's almost like those triplet boys that were found that were separated at birth, and they all smoked the same cigarettes and used the same toothpaste and all of that. That you can be interconnected with another living soul that you may never meet. That's another aspect?
Well, it's
like a soul fragmentation? Or?
I don't have a problem with that. No, I understand what you're talking about, and I'll agree to its feasibility. I'm incorporating that into what I know. So the answer is yes. Now, if you'd have to go with what you know, with greater details, and then I would have to judge each and any of these circumstances as to its validity or not. If it was, we want to call it a group soul, if we want to call it just a sharing of identical characteristics.
Personality.
Right. And that from a singular personality of prior into an equal division of the personality, so that they are identical this time, because they're each 33 1/3% of the original personality, and that the three personalities that you're dealing with this time and measuring exactly is probably not the exact personality of the prior. It'll only be a third of the characteristic.
Like an over.
A mixture of, yeah.
Okay. Here's another good one that a lot of couples would love to have an answer for. Say you're a divorced couple, and one person feels that they've really worked things through and spiritually evolved through the problems of the relationship, and the other one hasn't. I have questions specifically asked of me, not me personally, but just an open question to the world. Will I be linked to this other soul person until he or she works through with me what I feel I've worked through?
I gotta qualify this, by no means to diminish the spiritual beauty of the biochemical connection that spouses usually have by copulation, by sex. That there is a biochemical mating that is usually spiritually enhanced, or vice versa. Biochemical mating will spiritually enhance the individual, as well as karmic fulfillment, as well as preordained or predestined mutuality. I'm making up a word. Knows that how did this come to be? However, now that I've qualified that as being all righteous and glorious and beautiful, and it can enhance one another, even if the marriage goes on the rocks quite right away, and that it was really kind of more of a tragedy judged by everybody else around and even the two participants, that's still okay, and that's good. In other words, it's what it is. The point I want to make, I wanted to say enough of those sentences to state that when either one of them transforms, when they die or when they transform, they will have little or no connectedness at all. In other words, there will not be a remembrance, oh, hey, how do you do? And I mean, that's stepping on toes of the paradise stuff in a way, because
my mother didn't have 3 husbands over on the side waiting for
see,
her.
it's no, wait a minute. It's not denying that.
Yeah.
See, because on a level of paradise might very well be that. The perfect example is Elaine will get to see her grandmother. And that is not a falsehood that is a spiritual reality. But then just go a little stage farther at the point in time where a new incarnation, a new personality, that the soul is to take on, a new personality, there is usually no recollection whatsoever, and therefore no attractedness. Can frown on that one, could argue about that one, but usually, well, I said usually no attractedness and no recollection to either the prior personality or that which the personality was attracted to or became or enhanced. Meaning that if you are married and it's a very loving, spiritual, romantic, sexual relationship in all the different ways, there is a tremendous connectedness there, and that will be broken. That will be,
So when you say
I don't want to say annihilated.
It means till death.
Yeah. At least in the more intensive transformative states. Because again, if you are earthbound as a ghost or as a person who is in a purgatory type scenario or a scenario where you have to be earthbound to burn off bad karma, I mean that typical phrase, and then you can read all you need to read on using, what do you mean by burning off bad karma? You've never heard of it? Well, you have to read about 18 books on karma, or books that have the word karma in it. That burning off bad karma, unfinished business, and so on, they will still be attached. They will be attached to their characteristics and their personality. They will still be their personality. Even though there are more in the soul body, they will be without the human form, the human bodily form, but they will have the human characteristics and all of the personality. They will not have let go of the personality yet.
That's what spirits you talk to or show up on the earth.
Might also add, let me throw in here right now, because we're kind of getting to the point where we're getting intelligent enough to publicly frown on this channeling bullshit. I mean, that is where a vast, vast majority of channeling, actual channeling, takes place.
So
to say nothing of this egotistical channeling of, I have a dear friend who I love fervently, therefore I must be channeling him because I thought of him last night.
Yeah.
Right? Or I had a dream last night, and I dreamed about Tom Sawyer and his blue sweater. Therefore, I'm channeling Tom Sawyer. And, that's silly enough in itself.
Yeah.
And God bless the love attachment and the desire for that. Okay, that's okay. And anybody should be proud of their lovely feelings and attachments for that. But then actual bona fide channeling, still that is within this realm of disenfranchised or disembodied spiritual souls
that aren't getting on with the work that they're supposed to.
In other words, shall we dare say they are not progressing as well as I wish 98% of them could or should. I'm being judgmental about it, I have to. But yes, that's in that realm, and that is a low realm when we say high is better and low is worse.
So
I mean, that is still every bit attached to the earth plane, to the human condition, which is one of the grossest forms. I mean, it's the grossest form of the soul, of an individualistic human-type soul. Elaine asked me a question last night about the soul of a rabbit, and I'm not sure how she asked it, but anyway, in my paragraph that I fed back to her was that, well, if you want to think in terms of a group soul, or I use that phrase, in other words, a soul regarding the animal or plant kingdom, you should think in terms of that. Yeah, you can perceive of a soul body representing rabbits. It's all the rabbits in the world collectively make up a type of a soul. Please don't construe that as the equivalent. Here we go with measurement. The equivalent of the human soul. There's no to that. No. The human being, that characteristic, that which is the human being, and as we have scientific proof, cruising around the big blue marble only, that is a unique soul. It's an embodiment. It is the embodiment of the soul. The human condition is the embodiment of a unique soul. That does not happen in animals. It does not happen in plants. Now, we know that there are gleams of light in everything, and that collectively biomass, good phrase, biomass of the big blue marble. The human condition is part of that. See, it's an integral part of that. And it should never be denied that it exists separately from the biomass of the big blue marble, meaning from the primordial soup in the shadow of Mount St. Helens, where there's just nothing but black goop. And out of black goop, nothing flies through the air and lands in it. It contains the life molecules. And they are actually forming that primordial soup, that fundamental primordial soup. And I'm not saying that if you wait long enough, a human being's going to climb out of it. That strict evolutionary type thing, because that's foolishness. I mean, there is evolution, but it is nothing like the Darwin theory. I mean, nothing at all. I mean, if you just go to, I don't know if those so-called horses are still in Washington, D.C., but if they are, what a joke on science. Because they have these little tiny horses that were prehistoric, and they go horse 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to a modern day horse. It's so completely asinine. I mean, they shouldn't even be in the same phylum, practically speaking. In other words, it is not true. It is not an evolutionary, equestrian example of evolution. It's wrong. It's incorrect. Just like ever since the large dinosaurs have been in the major museums, they've had the wrong head on it. The Brontosaurus, I think it was. And they finally just recently, in fact, I said that in 1978 as an example. And it was since that time that they've discovered that it was the incorrect head. I mean, major problems. I went way off on a tangent. I kind of lost myself.
I had some pop into my mind.
Go ahead.
What about when the Virgin Mary or Kuan Yin or any of the great masters appear in different places and give, spiritual help? Or even, isn't there supposed to be a hierarchy of 7 spirits that help the earth to reach its highest evolvement? Now, how does if they have souls, is that different from the souls that are being channeled that are caught on the human level? All
right, a good example, because this is around 1990, good example would be a very saintly individual, a personality with a soul that was incarnated through genealogical means, well knows it happened, and that the soul incarnated with this particular human form. In other words, I shouldn't be judgmental about, because this was past in time, so I have to be careful what I say or what I claim. In fact, this particular one I'm thinking of is a Catholic canonized saint, which doesn't necessarily qualify him as a true saint, but trust me that he was, and I have to say he because in that incarnation it was a he, and he's referred to now as Saint Charbel. All right, and I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his hometown, so to speak, of Baalbek, Lebanon. All right. But that's kind of important to me right now because I have a few additional measurements for it. That which he was, and therefore that which he still is. Now, what am I saying? If he's a saint, wow, he's cool, and he did all of this stuff, to say the least, because isn't he a saint? And you're all, well, yeah, and he must have zipped right through the tunnel. In fact, he didn't even stop to have a life review. Wrong. In fact, the opposite is true. Now, this is divine in nature. And this is a very loving, unconditional love type gesture on the part of that soul. We'll still call him
a saint before he died.
Yes.
And he came back again.
He hasn't left.
Gotcha.
So therefore, the healings that have gone on, and there have been like 300 documented healings just at the local shrine in Lebanon. And granted, this is Christian, Catholic in nature, Mennonite, or close enough. Mennonite Catholics? No, I'm not saying it right.
No.
Oh, something like that.
Yeah.
Now I'm stuck with the word. Something like that. Anyway, a certain, like for instance, they have Jesuits and various others. Oh well, can't think of it. So it's in that kind of category, and there's the typical Catholic statuary type shrine. There's a bell tower, which isn't even a tower at all. It's only about 15, 20 feet tall. Various other things that I hope someday I'll get to see.
Oh, good.
Whoops.
Good answer.
Yeah.
How do you know?
I was there
Okay.
last week. At any rate, now I've lost my train of thought. Okay, in his circumstance, he died. Goodness, I can't even think in terms of dates because I know he dressed funny, so it'd have to be like 1830. Don't quote me on that, but in other words, as opposed to in the 1900s. Okay, so no, it's back that long ago, and then no, he died. He died certainly way before 1950.
Uh-huh.
All right, in 1950, close enough for the example. There were documented as scientifically as possible over 300 cures of disablements, blindness. There were at least 7. I'm guessing at the numbers, but as opposed to hundreds, 7 blindnesses that were instantly cured by the person finding their way to this shrine of Saint Charbel in the middle of Lebanon, actually more toward the the easterly side. At any rate, you can look it up on the map. And this all did take place, and this was all very bona fide, extremely bona fide. It was also a part of the canonization process of the Catholic Church to verify and therefore allow him. And I've got to defend the Catholic Church. They spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and they do a good job disqualifying certain individuals from claims of spiritual healing, the miracles they call them. I have a problem with that word, but spiritual healings and so on, especially after they've passed on. One of their prerequisites is that it's 3. I think that it's 2 or 3 bona fide healings that have to take place after the passing of the saintly person. In other words, if Mother Teresa is ever to be made a saint, there will have to be a spontaneous spiritual healing of a major disorder, like from blindness to sudden sight, by just calling out to Mother Teresa even though she's dead. So we have to, you ought to read into that. I mean, it's interesting what is prerequisite.
You missed it by one healing, right?
Yeah, too bad. You're no saint. You're lazy. You'd be a lazy.
So are you saying that Saint
Another
is now?
wait, I got to interrupt you because another little tidbit is one of my favorites, which I was attracted to and even manipulated to come and find out something about. Ann Sherman shanghaied me in her little Volkswagen minibus and took me to a little place called Fonda, New York, where I found some artifacts that were missing for a very long time, as luck would have it. And that is in reference to Saint Kateri or Kateri, and if it's pronounced Cathatuica, right, an American Mohawk Indian who is going to be canonized in the Catholic tradition, canonized as saint very shortly. I'm not talking years, talking like watch the news tonight, very shortly. And of course, I knew this. Again, I think it would be 1983 because it would be just prior to the first year I gave an official lecture at Monroe Community College. And during the lecture, I mentioned something of that nature. We have that on tape, audio tape. In the lecture, I mentioned that she would be. And of course, the few people who even knew anything of her were, oh, wow. So I guess right now she has a status of beatification. And then the last stage is sainthood in the Catholic tradition is canonization. So
she's a Mohawk Indian who became Catholic.
Yeah, oh yes, yeah.
Became a nun.
Well, I don't know. No, she didn't have the status of being a nun. Let me just put it this way: she was a saint. She did some cool stuff, and I mean, she prayed every day at the church, and one of the things that the Mohawk Indians wanted to find was where's the church. So everybody's running around looking for this structure and this foundation, and we know where it is now. Some of us know where it is now, and I don't know how important any of this is, but she'll be canonized very shortly, and that's good. I think that that's justified by my measurements too. Back to
But now, just to go back to what you said before, a saint's soul is it perfectly identical to every other.
their soul, yes, but that which the soul has opportunities,
and they took their
on their level.
Of opportunity.
On their level, in other words, in their realms. I'm not saying that. Well, yeah, they can actually choose, make decisions, and choose that to stay here. It's not guaranteed that they can decide because, I mean, come on, the Godhead, God can reabsorb instantly everything or anything. But where God is allowing the full evolutionary, I'm talking now souls, I'm not talking about plant and animal life, the evolutionary process to go free will, total free will, these saints that I'm referring to, the two examples that I've given, and that there is a process, whereas by their very nature as to who they were, and it was their personality and that which they evolved to be in that incarnation, that, and I guess there's a pattern of sorts, because by their very nature, part of their servitude, part of their volunteerism is not to return, but to stay. In fact, it's just the opposite of what you would wish for everybody to anticipate and expect or to strive for. In other words, you want to get out of here. This is called physical stuff. This is the illusion. I mean, this is reality, but it's only a portion of reality.
So you're saying Charbel's soul personality has stayed, but his body.
Right. His body is depleted. He no longer is in embodiment. And his soul is still very much here connected to the earth plane. By the earth plane, I mean the realm of the big blue marble. I mean, it can, in dimensions, see right away when I start, where is it? The middle of the earth? No. Is it on the surface of the earth? No. Impermeable. In other words, it's coexisting. Mm-hmm. The massless body doesn't require a house. Doesn't require, I mean, the nearest thing to a house would be the entire earth. Right? And one of the inadequacies of a vast majority of these saints that I'm referring to, I'm not blaming them for making a mistake or having a mistaken thing, but they, by my very high judgmental standards, they incorrectly associate themselves with only a particular place or two on the earth, meaning a spiritual healing center. Well, that could be manipulative in a way, but I don't see that as a very virtuous thing. I mean,
everywhere or anywhere.
Right. And I would have a tendency to prefer to just be not identified with a particular location, what I call loci, because there is an exact pinpoint where the spirituality of Saint Charbel is the greatest right this minute in Lebanon. And we better thank God for that, because we need all the help we can get in that area. And even though things since 1950 has gone worse and worse and worse by our judgmental standards, the spirituality is the same. And the spirituality is available to not just the Christians, but in that the Christian phrase, the Christianity. In other words, you can be a very Christian Jew, for that matter, the way I use the term. And to have that love of Christ and do a ritual of Buddhism, I don't have a problem with that. I'm sure that the churches do, because again, there we go with power, man-made power, as opposed to actual the Christ love. Christ didn't love a certain color; he loved all colors. Yeah. What else? I'm still stuck on Saint Charbel. But I mean, do you see that?
So I'm trying to see what the difference between the saintly spirits that are helpful, or the saintly soul personalities that are helpful, and the souls that just aren't getting on with their work and that are
Oh, yeah,
earthbound.
good point. Good comparison.
Right.
Here we go with the lack of scientific measurement. How do you know?
Yeah.
And the only way you can know is either through experimentation or just intuitive realization. How do you measure intuitive realization? Well, because a person smiles or cries? You can't go by that, and yet we do. I mean, we're guilty of that. You see a tearjerker movie, and at the end you say it was a really good movie. And of course, it brought on the emotions. But does that mean I can't watch a scientific documentary like The Powers of 10 and cry for a half hour? I can't sell that as a tearjerker movie. Everybody else laughs at it, and half the people, it was only 15 minutes long, half the people walked out on it. They didn't even like it at all. So we have to be careful of our measurements. The disenfranchised or disembodied souls that have not been able to promulgate and go on or progress are earthbound. Simultaneously, there are very saints and saintly souls. As a matter of fact, I could even do a dialogue on Albert Einstein. I mean, I should be so judgmental because his immediate family is still alive. And I've been very protective about wishing to say a lot of things about that which culminated a few years ago. I don't recall the year, but let's just say I was intuitively aware of his fulfillment of his uncontrollable desires to be earthbound and stay for the purpose of, well, I'll just say it very ambiguously. I'm saying that Albert Einstein had two needs. He needed to assist in whatever way he could, spiritually speaking, as a disembodied soul, and also facilitate some form of an apology to mankind for that which he took on as his responsibility of bringing into the technological knowledge of mankind, meaning the nuclear stuff, and that seeing it be misused, and he took on the responsibility, incorrectly so. I mean, it wasn't his fault, and he didn't do that. It was a collective effort. But the personality, Albert Einstein, took it on himself as the responsibility, and he wished to apologize and fervently serve from a spiritual point of view. And he demanded of himself, just with the words that he used, demanded of himself to be earthbound and did facilitate that. And it was since, I'm trying to think of what year, because that was a major event for me. Oh, in the early 80s. Oh, somewhere like 1984. Might have been a little bit later. See, 85 was a plane crash, right? So it was before that well-known plane crash in my life. So, all right, let's say about 1984 to give you a reference point. In fact, I tried to remember by saying the exact number of years since his death. I believe it was 1955 or 56. All right, so I don't know. It could have even been 1985. But anyway, in the early 80s, from around 1980 to the 1985, somewhere in that zone, I'm claiming that I've been spiritually aware of his passing. Because, I mean, he's been dead since 1955 and released, and recognition of his karmic fulfillment as well as his personality fulfillment. Now, this demand that affected his karma, that he just piled on a certain type of, and I won't say what type, certain type of karma that therefore became a demand, so to speak, that he be earthbound for that period of time. And that now that's okay. And that the saints that are here for hundreds and hundreds of years and doing spiritual healings and works, you have to be careful about thinking of manipulation, because is that not manipulation? To spiritually enhance somebody sounds all lovey-dovey, but what are you doing? Could you conceivably be denying that individual their karmic fulfillment? If they need to be in a state of dis-ease with a broken back for a year and sit around and get fat, wear a blue sweater, to have somebody come up and wave a magic wand and say, there you go back to your employment. Well, wait a minute, what have you done? It sounds good.
The lesson may not have been learned.
Right.
Okay, I think we're running out of time, but maybe if there's anything that anyone viewing here as far as reincarnation, maybe it's not to worry about it. Live in the moment.
Well, yeah. Also, I'll tell you what. Right now, be judgmental and say I've read parts of many books with part of the title saying reincarnation. This, the Tao of Reincarnation. I mean, you mix it up. There's many books on the subject. I've been told about. People have read books and told me, well, this book says this, and that. I have been totally dissatisfied with 98% of everything I've read on the subject. It's just a complete lie. It's a fabrication. Blavatsky's work was then dealt with by Schleem, and he wrote a pamphlet or a book on reincarnation, which he didn't write at all. He wrote it from what he read from Blavatsky. So we're getting interpretations of interpretations and so on. So judgmentally, I've been dissatisfied with anything I've read on reincarnation up until I read the book, The Seat of the Soul. And here, we'll do one of these to sell the book. Can you see it there? Yeah, just a little book, Gary Zukov, The Seat of the Soul. And I haven't met the man. I'd like to, certainly. It's a good book. I might add that I read one chapter in that book, a later chapter when I first got it, just read a paragraph and didn't like it at all. I was so disappointed because I thought, oh, Gary Zukov, what have you done? You've gone way off on a witch hunt or something like that. And then I did force myself to read the book cover to cover, one of the few that I have, and it's a great book. It's not a book for everybody. So if you read into it and are dissatisfied, don't force yourself unless you're that type of person. But it's a very good book. It is not a book on reincarnation. But trust me, if you can perceive accurately, starting with reverence, in the way Gary Zukov talks about reverence, and if you can perceive that which the book talks about external power, about personalities and characteristics, and this and that, and he does talk directly about aspects of reincarnation, but it is not a book on reincarnation per se, but it's the best book that I've read regarding the subject of reincarnation. I wish I'd done a little better. So we say goodbye and God bless you all.